The space station floated like a giant metal flower above the green and blue planet below. Inside the station's biggest meeting room, beings from across the galaxy sat around a circular table. The room smelled different to each species there. To the humans, it smelled like ozone and metal. To the Vorthak, it carried the sweet scent of victory they were about to claim. Jack Morrison sat straight in his chair, his gray suit perfectly pressed. His brown hair showed bits of silver at the temples, earned from 10 years of keeping peace between species that often wanted war. Next to him, Lisa Chang typed notes on her data pad, her black hair pulled back in a simple style that followed. Diplomatic protocols. They were Earth's representatives, and they had learned to be very, very patient. Across the table, Supreme Commander Krixtan of the Vorthak Empire made a sound that passed for laughter among his kind. His forearms moved as he spoke, and his scaled skin shifted from purple to deep red, showing his confidence. The Vorthak stood 8 feet tall, with teeth that could bite through steel. They were warriors from a world where everything tried to kill everything else. "The humans speak of peace again," Krixtan said, his voice like grinding stones. "Always peace, always talk, never action." He turned his 3 eyes toward Jack. "Your people are soft, Morrison. You come from a death world, yes, but you have forgotten how to be deadly." Jack didn't react. He had heard this before, many times. The other species at the table watched carefully. The Etherians, tall and thin with skin like morning mist, whispered among themselves. Their representative, a being called Whisper of Stars, had told everyone many times that humans were proof that evolution could overcome violent origins. The Zephrani, who looked like large beetles made of copper, clicked their approval of Krixtan's words. They had trade deals with the Vorthak and wanted to keep them happy. "We are here to discuss the border incidents," Jack said calmly. His voice carried across the room without being loud. 7 human colony ships have been destroyed in Vorthak space over the past year. 3,000 civilians dead. We seek answers. Krixtan's skin turned a brighter red, a color humans had learned meant amusement. "Accidents happen in space, human. Your ships are weak. Your people are careless. Perhaps they should stay in their own territory." Lisa's fingers stopped moving over her data pad for just a moment. Jack noticed but said nothing. He had trained her well. Never show anger. Never show fear. Never show what humans really were. "We have flight recordings," Jack continued, pulling up holographic displays. Each ship was following approved flight paths. Each sent distress signals. Each was answered by Vorthak weapons fire. The room grew quiet. The Crystalline Collective's observer, a being of living crystal that hummed when it moved, leaned forward. They rarely cared about flesh-being conflicts, but 3,000 deaths was noteworthy. "The Vorthak Empire does not answer to prey species," Krixtan said, standing to his full height. "Your people entered our space. They paid the price. Be grateful we allow any of your ships to pass through our territory." An Etherian diplomat tried to calm things down. "Surely we can find a peaceful solution. The humans have always been reasonable. They have mediated our conflicts for 30 years without fail." "Because they are weak," Krixtan said. "They mediate because they cannot fight. Look at them. 2 representatives, no weapons, no warrior guards. Even their ship outside is white, the color of surrender before the battle begins." Jack stood slowly. At 6 feet tall, he was much shorter than the Vorthak commander. His movements were careful, controlled. "We paint our ships white because we choose to come in peace. There is a difference between cannot and will not, Commander." "Is there?" Krixtan moved closer, his breath hot and smelling of sulfur. "Your Earth is classified as a death world, yes. High gravity, toxic atmosphere to most species, full of predators. But you humans? You eat plants now. You talk instead of fight. You have forgotten what you are." Lisa stood as well, her hand moving to Jack's arm. Not to stop him, but to remind him. They had protocols. They had rules. Humanity had chosen to be better. "We request a formal investigation into the destroyed ships," Jack said, sitting back down. "We request compensation for the families of the dead. We request guaranteed safe passage for human vessels through Vorthak space." The laughter from Crixton was louder this time. Other Vorthak in the room joined in, a sound like breaking rocks. You request? You request? The sheep requests the wolf not eat it. How amusing. The Zafrani representative clicked what might have been laughter too. The humans always request, they never demand. In all my years I have never seen a human fight. Do they even know how anymore? Jack pulled out an old paper photograph from his jacket pocket. Real paper was rare, expensive. This one showed soldiers from Earth's Second World War, faces dirty, eyes hard, standing in the ruins of a city. He looked at it for a long moment, then put it away. We know how, he said quietly. We choose not to. Choice. Crixton spit the word. The choice of the weak. You hide behind words because you fear blood. Your species could not last one day in true combat with the Vorthak Empire. The meeting continued for 3 more hours. Jack presented evidence. Crixton dismissed it. The Etherians suggested compromises. The Zafrani supported the Vorthak. The crystalline collective observed in silence. Through it all, Jack and Lisa remained calm, professional, peaceful. When the session ended for the day, Jack and Lisa returned to their quarters on the human ship Harmony. The ship was indeed painted white, with the blue symbol of Earth on its hull. Inside, Captain Ryan Foster waited for them in the conference room. How bad? Ryan asked. He was younger than Jack, with red hair and green eyes that had seen too much, despite his age. They're going to push harder, Jack said, loosening his tie. Crixton smells blood in the water. Not blood, Lisa corrected. He thinks he smells fear. Jack walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Out there, somewhere, were the debris fields of 7 colony ships, 3,000 people who had believed in humanity's new way, 3,000 people who had died believing that choosing peace was the right path. They've forgotten, Jack said softly. The whole galaxy has forgotten what humans really are. No, Lisa said, joining him at the window. They never knew. They see our choice to be peaceful and think we are peaceful by nature. They see our diplomacy and think we are weak. Ryan cleared his throat. Orders from Earth came in during your meeting. President Nash wants a full report. The Military Council is asking questions. What kind of questions? Jack asked, though he already knew. The kind that get asked when 3,000 civilians die, Ryan replied. The kind that wonder if 30 years of peace is enough. The kind that remember what we used to be. Jack looked at the photograph again, the one he had carried for 10 years. His grandfather stood in that picture, part of an army that had once burned entire cities to end a war. Humans had been very good at war. Too good. So good that when they reached the stars, they had made a collective decision to be something else. But decisions could be changed. Send the report, Jack said. Tell them the Vorthak are pushing for war. Tell them the galaxy thinks we're weak. Tell them... He paused, looking at the stars one more time. Tell them we're running out of cheeks to turn. Outside, the Vorthak fleet gathered, their ships dark and bristling with weapons. They thought tomorrow would bring human surrender. They thought the Deathworlders had forgotten their nature. They were about to learn how wrong they were. 3 days had passed since the first meeting. The space station's corridors were busy with different species moving between sessions. The Etherians floated more than walked, their bodies barely touching the ground. The Zafrani skittered on, 6 legs, their metal-like shells clicking against the floor, and the Vorthak strutted through the halls like they owned them, making smaller beings move out of their way. Jack Morrison had not slept well. Each night, he read the names of the dead colonists, families who had packed their whole lives into ships hoping to farm new worlds, teachers who wanted to spread knowledge to the stars, children who had drawn pictures of their new homes before they ever got to see them. 3,000 names. 3,000 reasons why humanity had chosen peace. 3,000 reasons why that choice was getting harder to maintain. The main council chamber was fuller today. Word had spread that something important would happen. Representatives from smaller species had come to watch, filling the observation balconies. They whispered about the humans, the strange Deathworlders who never fought back no matter how much they were pushed. Crixton entered the room like a conqueror. His scaled skin was bright orange today, the color of anticipated victory. Behind him, 12 Vorthak warriors stood at attention, their plasma rifles visible despite station rules against weapons in the council chambers. Nobody challenged them. Nobody dared. "Before we continue yesterday's discussion," Crixton announced, not waiting for the session to formally begin, "the Vorthak Empire has an announcement." Jack and Lisa exchanged glances. This was not on the agenda. The Vorthak commander activated a holographic map of the galaxy's outer spiral. 12 systems lit up in red. Jack recognized them immediately. They were human colonies, established over the past 20 years, peaceful settlements with a combined population of 50 million souls. "These systems," Crixton said, his voice filling the chamber, "belong to the Vorthak Empire by ancient right. Our ancestors hunted in this space before your species learned to bang rocks together. We reclaim them now." The room erupted. The Etherians fluttered in distress. The smaller species chittered and squeaked in fear. The crystalline collective's observer hummed a low tone that made everyone's teeth ache. But Jack and Lisa sat still, silent, watching. "This is illegal," Whisper of Star said, their ethereal voice shaking. "Those are settled colonies. The Galactic Council recognized human claims to those systems." "The Galactic Council," Crixton laughed, "is a gathering of the weak, pretending to have power. The Vorthak Empire takes what is ours." The Zephrani representative clicked their approval. "The Vorthak have shown us the mineral surveys of those systems. Very valuable. The Commerce Guild supports this claim. Human colonies are not profitable enough to matter." Jack stood slowly. The room went quiet, waiting for the human response. Everyone expected begging, negotiation, perhaps an offer of shared mining rights. That was what humans did. They compromised, they found middle ground. "No," Jack said. The simple word hung in the air like a physical thing. "No?" Crixton moved closer, all 4 of his arms spreading in what his species considered a threat display. "The sheep says no to the wolf?" "Those colonies are under Earth's protection," Jack continued, his voice steady. 20 years of development, 50 million humans, families, children, we will not abandon them. Then you will watch them burn," Crixton said. It was at that moment that Captain Ryan Foster entered the chamber. His white uniform was crisp, but his face was pale. He walked directly to Jack, not running but moving with purpose. Every eye in the room followed him as he handed Jack a data pad. Jack read it. His expression did not change, but Lisa saw his knuckles turn white as he gripped the device. "May I share this with the Council?" Jack asked Ryan. "The information is already being transmitted to Earth," Ryan replied. "They need to know." Jack turned to face the assembly. For the first time in 30 years of human diplomacy, his voice carried an edge of something that made several species step back. 40 minutes ago, he began. The colony ship Esperanza was destroyed in neutral space. 800 families, agricultural specialists, teachers, children. He paused, letting each word land like a hammer blow. The ship was transmitting surrender signals on all frequencies. The Vorthak destroyer Redclaw fired anyway. Crixton's skin shifted to a pleased purple. They were heading to one of the systems we claimed. They were warned. They were civilians, Lisa said, standing beside Jack. Her usual calm was cracking, just slightly. There were 300 children on that ship. Weak cubs grow into weak adults, Crixton replied. Better they die before they can spread their weakness further. The Etherians gasped. Even the Zephrani seemed uncomfortable with such casual brutality. The crystalline collective's observer stood, their body ringing like a bell. This is murder, Whisper of Stars said. The Galactic Council must respond. The Galactic Council, Crixton said, turning to face the Etherian, will do nothing, because the humans will do what they always do. They will talk, they will negotiate, they will offer compromises, and in the end they will accept our terms because they are too weak to do otherwise. Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out the old photograph again. He looked at it for a long moment. His grandfather's face stared back at him, covered in mud and blood, standing in the ruins of Berlin. Humans had ended that war by showing the world what total destruction looked like. They had been so good at it that they had scared themselves into choosing a different path. Ambassador Morrison, the Crystalline Collective's observer spoke, their voice like wind chimes. What is Earth's response? Jack put the photograph away. He looked at each species representative in turn. The Etherians, who had always patronized humanity's peaceful nature. The Zafrani, who saw them as easy marks for unfair trade deals. The smaller species who appreciated human mediation but never respected it. And the Vorthak, who saw kindness as weakness. Humanity formally withdraws from mediation, Jack said. The room went silent. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. What does that mean? Whisper of Stars asked, their voice barely audible. It means, Jack said, walking toward the exit with Lisa beside him, that for 30 years we have chosen to be your diplomats, your peacekeepers, your neutral ground. That choice has been revoked. You cannot simply leave. Crixton called after them. You have obligations, treaties, trade agreements. Jack stopped at the door. He turned back, and for the first time, the galaxy saw something in human eyes that had been hidden for 3 decades. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was something colder, more calculating. It was the look of a species that had once split atoms to end wars. Commander Crixton, Jack said quietly, you spoke truth earlier. We do come from a death world. Earth produces survivors, but you made one mistake in your assessment. What mistake? Crixton asked, his confidence wavering for the first time. You said we forgot how to be deadly, Jack replied. We didn't forget. We chose to stop. There's a difference. He and Lisa left the chamber. Ryan followed. Behind them, the room exploded into chaos. The Etherians called for emergency sessions. The Zafrani tried to calculate the economic impact of human withdrawal. The smaller species panicked about who would mediate their disputes now. But Crixton stood still, his skin slowly shifting from purple to a muddy brown. For the first time in his life, he wondered if he had made a mistake. On the human ship Harmony, Jack stood in the command center. The white paint on the walls seemed to mock him now. 30 years of peace. 30 years of choosing to be better. Gone in 40 minutes of weapons fire. Captain Foster, Jack said formally, send a message to Earth. Priority 1. Authentication code Omega. Ryan's fingers hesitated over the controls. Sir, that code authorizes Protocol 7, Jack confirmed. Send it. As the message traveled through space toward Earth, Jack looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the debris of the Esperanza floated in the void. 800 more names to add to his list. 800 more reasons why humanity's patience had just run out. The Vorthak wanted to see what Deathworlders were really like. They were about to get their wish. The message reached Earth in 6 hours through quantum relay. In the old war room beneath Cheyenne Mountain, alarms that hadn't sounded in 30 years came to life. Red lights bathed concrete walls that had been built to survive nuclear war. Military personnel who had been maintaining peaceful archives suddenly found themselves reading protocols their predecessors had hoped would never be used again. President Catherine Nash stood before a display showing every human ship and colony in the galaxy. She was 60 years old with silver hair and eyes that had seen humanity's transformation, from warriors to diplomats. Now she had to oversee the reversal of that transformation. How many ships do we have? She asked Admiral Kyle Patterson. Kyle was not wearing his cultural liaison uniform anymore. He had changed into something older, darker. The uniform bore symbols that predated humanity's entry into the galactic community. Eagles clutching arrows, stars and stripes. Symbols of Earth when it was divided, when humans fought each other before they learned to fight together. 3,000 diplomatic vessels in active service, Kyle replied. All of them are ready. Ready? Catherine raised an eyebrow. They're painted white and carry mediators. Kyle smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Madam President, we need to have A conversation about what our diplomatic vessels really are. Across the galaxy, the changes began within minutes of Protocol 7's activation. On Trade Station Beta 9, the human vessel Harmony's Peace sat in dock. Alien traders watched in confusion as the ship's crew emerged in spacesuits and began spraying the white hull with something that made the paint bubble and dissolve. Underneath was not metal, but something that seemed to drink in light, making the ship hard to look at directly. Captain Emma Rodriguez supervised the transformation of her ship, the Columbus. For 5 years, she had carried trade goods and negotiators between systems. Her crew had worn white uniforms and smiled at everyone. Now they wore black with armor plating that had been hidden in storage compartments marked emergency equipment. Captain, her first officer, Jacob Stone, reported. The botanical domes are retracting. Railguns are online. Emma nodded. The botanical domes had been a nice touch. Aliens saw them and thought humans cared more about growing flowers than fighting. They never questioned why the domes were built with reinforced titanium frames that could withstand direct hits. They never wondered why the hydroponic systems could be flushed and converted to cooling systems for massive weapons in under 10 minutes. On the Crystalline Collective's observation post, their greatest minds watched human space in fascination and growing concern. Ships they had scanned hundreds of times suddenly showed different readings. Mass that had been hidden, power sources that had been dampened, weapon signatures that violated 3 different peace treaties. "This is impossible," hummed Shard of Truth, their lead scientist. "These readings suggest every human ship is a warship. They have been flying warships painted white for 30 years. Back on Earth, Catherine addressed humanity on every channel, in every language. Behind her, the flags of Earth's old nations hung together, a reminder of when humans were divided and fought each other with such fury that they had to unite just to survive themselves. "Citizens of Earth and her colonies," she began. 30 years ago, we made a choice. We chose to set aside our weapons, to forget our skills at war, to become something better. We chose to be the galaxy's peacekeepers, its mediators, its voice of reason." She paused, her expression hardening. "Today, the Vorthok Empire destroyed the colony ship Esperanza. 800 civilians, 300 children. This follows 7 other attacks over the past year. The galaxy has mistaken our choice for peace as an inability to wage war. They are about to learn how wrong they are. The response from humanity was not panic, it was not fear. It was something that made observing aliens deeply uncomfortable. It was unity. 3 billion humans on Earth and 50 million in the colonies moved with singular purpose. Factory workers who had been making trade goods found their assembly lines converting to ammunition production. Pilots who had been flying cargo routes remembered their combat training. Scientists who had been researching peaceful applications of physics began dusting off weapons designs that had been sealed for 3 decades. The Etherians were the first to feel the economic impact. Within 3 hours of Protocol 7's activation, every human trade route shut down. The delicate species discovered that humans handled 60% of their food distribution, not because aliens couldn't do it, but because humans were willing to fly through dangerous space that others avoided. Earthborn pilots laughed at asteroid fields that terrified other species. They navigated ion storms that would send Etherian ships spinning out of control. The Zephrani discovered that human financial systems processed 80% of galactic transactions, not because humans were the best at math, but because they had the most secure systems. Systems built on cryptography developed during Earth's digital warfare age, when nations attacked each other through computers before humanity learned to work together. But it was the military observers who saw the truly terrifying truth. In the Outer Rim, the diplomatic vessel USS Horizon dropped its white shell like a snake shedding skin. Underneath was a battlecruiser that shouldn't exist. Its hull was made of an alloy that humans had developed in secret, combining earth metals with materials they had quietly mined from systems nobody else wanted, because the gravity was too high or the radiation too intense. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Alex Murphy to Admiral Patterson. "All ships report ready. Weapon systems online. Shields operational." Shields. Humans had shields. For 30 years, alien species had believed humans were too primitive to develop shield technology. They never realized that humans had developed something better than energy shields. They had developed armor that could adapt, that could learn from what hit it and become resistant. Armor based on the simple principle that humans had learned from their own evolution. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. On mining colony Zephyrin 7, human workers were evacuating. The insectoid Zephyrini managers clicked in confusion. "Where are you going?" demanded Overseer Krextall. "You have contracts. You cannot simply leave." Paul Harrison, who had spent 5 years mining in conditions that would kill most species, pulled off his work helmet. "Contracts void. You sided with the Vorthak." "This is economic warfare," Krextall protested. "The Galactic Council will hear of this." Paul laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. The Galactic Council is about to learn what warfare actually looks like. Across human space, children were being moved to bunkers that had been disguised as schools. Military installations that had been labeled as research stations powered up weapons that had been tested in secret for 3 decades. Humans had not stopped advancing their military technology. They had just hidden it, waiting, hoping they would never need it. The transformation took 6 hours. 6 hours to shed 30 years of disguise. 6 hours for the galaxy to realize that humans had not been playing at being civilized. They had been civilized. By choice. A choice that had just been revoked. In the council chambers, the alien representatives watched news feeds in growing horror. The Vorthak fleet, so proud and threatening, suddenly looked small compared to the human ships emerging from what they had thought were cargo bays and diplomatic stations. Whisper of Stars turned to their aide. "How? How did we not know?" The aide, young by Etherian standards, could only whisper back, They told us they were from a death world. We thought they had evolved past it. We never considered they were just being polite." On the command ship reminder, Admiral Patterson stood before a tactical display showing every Vorthak military installation in the galaxy. Red dots covered hundreds of worlds. His officers waited for orders, their faces grim but determined. "Send a message to all Vorthak military installations," Patterson commanded. "They have 6 hours to evacuate civilians." "Sir," Captain Stone asked, "what if they don't believe we're serious?" Patterson looked at the young officer. "Then they'll learn the same lesson Earth learned a long time ago. When humans stop playing nice, we don't do it halfway." The message went out on all frequencies. 6 hours. It was more warning than the colonists on the Esperanza had received. It was humanity's last gesture of mercy. The countdown began. The 6 hours passed like heartbeats. Some Vorthak installations evacuated civilians. Most did not. Commander Krixton had sent orders to all military bases that the human threat was a bluff, that the weak species was trying to frighten them, with empty warnings. He would regret that order for the rest of his very short life. At exactly 6 hours and 1 second after the warning, humanity struck. Not gradually, not with building intensity, but all at once, everywhere, with a coordination that should have been impossible for a species that had only achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago. Captain Emma Rodriguez led the assault on the Vorthak's main fleet base at Throne System. Her strike force of 12 ships appeared inside the enemy formation, not at the edge of the system as physics said they should. The Vorthak had 3 seconds to wonder how humans had achieved in-system jumps before kinetic rounds traveling at 20% the speed of light tore through their shields. "Shields are for energy weapons," Emma explained to her crew as they watched Vorthak battleships crumble like paper. "We throw rocks, very fast rocks." The Vorthak had never faced kinetic weapons in space combat. Why would anyone use primitive projectiles when energy beams existed? They learned the answer quickly. Energy could be deflected, absorbed, dispersed. A tungsten rod moving at relativistic speeds didn't care about your shield frequency. It just hit you with the force of a small nuclear weapon. On Vorthak Prime, the Empire's throne world, Colonel Daniel Park led what humans called Marines. The Vorthak warriors waiting for them expected soldiers like the ones they had seen in human diplomatic guards. Calm, measured, professional. They got something else entirely. The drop pods punched through the chlorine ammonia atmosphere like meteors. The Vorthak had thought their air would be poison to humans, that invaders would need full environmental suits that would make them slow and vulnerable. The first Vorthak warrior to see a human marine learned the truth seconds before. He died. Humans wore armor but not environmental suits. Their faces were exposed behind simple breathing masks. The chlorine ammonia atmosphere that would kill most species in seconds just made their eyes water a little. Irritating, Sergeant Aaron White commented as he put 3 rounds through a Vorthak warrior's chest plate. The warrior had scales that could turn blade strikes and natural armor that could resist small arms fire. The human bullets were neither small nor conventional. They were designed to penetrate, expand, and devastate. They were designed by a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing. The Vorthak warriors were apex predators from a world where everything was dangerous. They were fast, strong, with natural weapons and instincts honed by evolution. But they were ambush predators used to quick, decisive kills. Humans were something worse. Humans were persistence predators. A Vorthak warrior named Vrextor shot Aaron in the arm with a plasma bolt, taking the limb off at the elbow. He expected the human to fall, to scream, to die. Instead, Aaron applied a tourniquet with his teeth, switched his rifle to his other hand, and kept advancing. He walked through plasma fire that would have sent other species into shock. He didn't run, didn't charge. He just walked forward, steady, inevitable, like death itself. "That's not possible," Vrextor gasped, before Aaron's knife found his throat. "You're missing an arm." "I've got another one," Aaron replied. Across the planet, similar scenes played out. Humans took injuries that would kill other species 3 times over and kept fighting. A Marine named Jennifer Bailey lost both legs to a mine and dragged herself 200 meters to destroy an enemy gun placement. A soldier named Chris Young had his lung punctured by shrapnel and held his breath for 4 minutes while he completed his mission. The Crystalline Collective, observing from their neutral posts, recorded everything with growing fascination and horror. They watched humans use tactics from their pre-space history, flanking maneuvers that Alexander had used, psychological warfare that Sun Tzu had written about, brutal efficiency that Rome had perfected. But it was the space battle that truly showed what humans had been hiding. The Vorthak Empire's grand fleet, 3,000 ships strong, engaged the human force above their throne world. They outnumbered the humans 4-1. The battle lasted 43 minutes. Human ships didn't fight like other species. They didn't maintain formations and exchange fire at safe distances. They jumped in close inside minimum weapons range, where combat became brutal and personal. They rammed smaller vessels. They boarded larger ones. They turned the battle into chaos, and in chaos, humans thrived. Lieutenant Commander Susan Miller commanded a boarding party onto the Vorthak flagship. The Vorthak expected soldiers. They got something from humanity's darker past. The boarders moved through the ship like a virus, using ventilation systems the Vorthak thought were too small for any sentient being. Humans could compress their bodies, hold their breath, squeeze through spaces that seemed impossible. "We're not just from a death world," Susan explained to her team as they cut through another bulkhead. "We're from a death world where we were both predator and prey. We learned to hunt and we learned to hide. We learned to be everything." The flagship's bridge fell in 12 minutes. The Vorthak commander, Admiral Krathkin, stood surrounded by dead warriors, facing 5 humans who looked barely winded despite fighting through 300 defenders. "How?" he asked. "You're supposed to be weak, peaceful, diplomatic." "We were diplomatic," Susan corrected, putting a bullet through his head. Past tense. The Throne World's defense fleet was gone in 6 hours. The ground invasion took 11 more. 17 hours total for the capital of an empire that had stood for 1,000 years to fall completely. But humanity wasn't done. Simultaneous attacks hit every major Vorthak installation across 300 systems. Humans used weapons the galaxy had banned, not because humans hadn't signed the treaties, but because humans had written them. They had written the treaties to ban weapons only humans had thought to create. Nanoswarms that ate through hull plating. Viruses designed to attack Vorthak computer systems based on human experience with digital warfare. Psychological weapons that broadcast the dying screams of Vorthak warriors on all frequencies, because humans understood that fear was a weapon too. The smaller species watching from their safe zones began to understand something terrifying. Humans hadn't become peaceful because they evolved past violence. They became peaceful because they had gotten so good at violence that it scared them. They had looked at what they were capable of and chosen to be something else. Until now. On Earth, President Catherine Nash received reports from across the galaxy. Victory after victory. The Vorthak Empire was collapsing faster than anyone had predicted, not because humans had better technology or superior numbers, but because humans had never actually stopped preparing for war. They had just hidden it, channeled it, controlled it. The Etherians are requesting we stop, an aide reported. They say we're being excessive. Catherine looked at the casualty report from the Esperanza. 800 names, 300 children. Excessive? She said quietly. We haven't even started being excessive. Excessive would be doing to them what they did to our colonists. We're being precise. There's a difference. The Zephrani, who had supported the Vorthak, quickly withdrew that support and offered humans favorable trade agreements. The Etherians begged for human trade routes to resume. The Crystalline Collective formally recognized humanity as a military hyperpower and suggested new treaties. But in space above Vorthak Prime, Admiral Patterson stood on the bridge of the Reminder, looking down at the conquered world. His officers waited for orders. Destroy it, occupy it, enslave it as the Vorthak had planned to do to human colonies. Sir, Captain Stone asked, what are your orders? Patterson thought of the photograph Jack Morrison carried, the one of soldiers from World War II. Humans who had fought with such fury that they had to build the United Nations just to keep from destroying themselves. Humans who had created nuclear weapons and then spent decades learning not to use them. We're done here, Patterson said. Recall all forces. Sir? Stone was confused. We're just leaving? We've made our point, Patterson replied. They wanted to see what Deathworlders were really like. Now they know. Let them live with that knowledge. As human forces withdrew, they left behind something on every conquered Vorthak world. Not occupation forces, not weapons, not threats. They left monuments. Simple stone markers with the names of every human killed by the Vorthak. 3,000 names from the colony ships, 800 from the Esperanza. At the bottom of each monument, the same words. We chose peace. You chose this. The Vorthak Empire, which had taken 1,000 years to build, ceased to exist in 17 hours. Not 17 days, not 17 weeks. 17 hours. The galaxy would never forget. The throne room of the Vorthak Empire stood empty except for 3 figures. Jack Morrison had returned, no longer wearing his diplomat's suit, but simple black clothing that somehow seemed more formal. Beside him stood Grand Observer Yil Thresh, of the Crystalline Collective, their body humming with frequencies that recorded everything. And in chains made from his own people's strongest metal sat Crixtan, the supreme commander who had started it all. The mighty Vorthak warrior looked smaller now. His scales had turned a permanent gray, the color of defeat in his species. His forearms hung limp and his 3 eyes struggled to focus on the human who had warned him just days ago. Jack pulled out a bottle of water from his pack. Not just any water, but pure earth water, collected from mountain springs that had never known pollution. On the galactic market, that bottle was worth more than some starships. He opened it and offered it to Crixtan. The Vorthak looked at it, suspiciously. Poison? Water, Jack replied. From Earth? From the death world you mocked. Crixtan drank. The water was clear, cool, perfect. It was the gesture that confused him more than humanity's victory. Conquerors didn't share their precious resources with the conquered. We could have done this 30 years ago, Jack said, sitting on the steps that once led to the Vorthak throne. When we first met the galactic community, our military advisors ran simulations. Every species, every empire, every possible threat. Do you know what the results were? Crixtan said nothing. Total human victory in 90% of scenarios, Jack continued. The other 10% ended in mutual destruction, which some of our strategists also considered a form of victory. Ylthresh's crystalline form rang like bells. Then why? Why choose peace? Jack pulled out the old photograph again. His grandfather's face covered in mud and blood, standing in ruins. Because we scared ourselves. We got so good at killing that we nearly killed our own world. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, chemical agents that could destroy entire ecosystems. We looked at what we had become and decided to become something else. He stood, walking to the massive window that overlooked the Vorthak capital. Human medical ships were already arriving, treating wounded Vorthak civilians. Human supply vessels were distributing food and water. The conquerors were feeding the conquered. We chose to forget, Jack said. Not how to fight, but how to want to fight. We chose to be diplomats, mediators, peacekeepers. We wrote treaties banning weapons we had already perfected. We painted our warships white and filled them with negotiators instead of soldiers. But you never actually disarmed, Ylthresh observed. No, Jack admitted. We hoped we had changed. We wanted to believe we had evolved past our nature. But evolution takes millions of years. We've only been in space for 50, under the white paint, under the diplomatic words, under the trade agreements and peace treaties. We're still the species that survived Earth. Crixton finally spoke, his voice rough. What happens now? You've destroyed our fleet, conquered our worlds. Will you enslave us, exterminate us? Jack turned to him, and there was something in his eyes that was almost sad. No, you're going to live. You're going to rebuild. And you're going to remember. Every time you see a human ship, every time you meet a human diplomat, every time you hear our language, you're going to remember that we choose to let you live. That's cruel, Crixton said. Yes, Jack agreed. It is. The next day, the Galactic Council reconvened. The chamber that had once buzzed with confidence was now silent with fear. Every species representative sat carefully in their assigned seats, none of the casual mingling that had marked previous sessions. When Jack Morrison entered, wearing his diplomat's suit again, several representatives actually flinched. Honored. Representatives, Jack began, taking his seat as if the last week hadn't happened. Shall we discuss the new territorial agreements? The Zephrani representative clicked nervously. The Commerce Guild wishes to formally apologize for our support of Vorthak aggression. We offer humanity most favored trading status in all sectors. Noted, Jack said, making a mark on his datapad. Whisper of Stars, the Etherian delegate, fluttered, anxiously. We wish to discuss the resumption of human trade routes. Our people are experiencing shortages. We'll resume shipping tomorrow, Lisa Chang said, back in her diplomatic role. Standard rates. Standard? The Etherian seemed surprised. You're not increasing prices? Why would we? Lisa asked. We're not trying to profit from this. We just wanted it to stop. The Crystalline Collective's observer leaned forward. What? Of the Vorthak territories? Jack activated a holographic display. The former Vorthak Empire will be administered jointly. Each species will contribute to rebuilding. Humans will provide security during the transition. You're not claiming their worlds? A smaller species representative asked in shock. We don't want their worlds, Jack replied. We want peace. We've always wanted peace. Recent events don't change that. Admiral Kyle Patterson entered the chamber, still wearing his military uniform rather than his cultural liaison outfit. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably at his presence. Admiral Patterson will be presenting a new doctrine for consideration, Jack announced. Kyle stood before the assembly, his presence filling the room in a way that had nothing to do with his physical size. The Patterson doctrine is simple. Humanity will return to our role as mediators, peacekeepers, and diplomatic facilitators. We will paint our ships white again. We will negotiate trade agreements. We will help settle disputes. He paused, letting his words sink in. But, he continued, you will remember that this is a choice. You will remember that we are Deathworlders who choose to play nice. You will remember that our patience is not infinite, and you will remember that beneath the white paint, our ships are still what they've always been. Is that a threat? Asked a representative from a species that had remained neutral. No, Patterson replied. It's a reminder. Earth's children carry the legacy of thousands of years of warfare. We refined violence to an art form, then chose to abandon it. But choosing to abandon something doesn't mean forgetting how to do it. Jack stood addressing the room one final time. We don't want to be your conquerors. We don't want to be your enemies. We want to be what we've been for 30 years, your partners in peace. But peace is a choice that everyone has to make. When you force us to stop choosing peace, you won't like what we choose instead. The council voted unanimously to accept the Patterson Doctrine. 300 years later, a young Vorthak student named Victor sat in a history class on New Vorthak, the world his people had rebuilt after the fall of the Empire. His teacher, old enough to remember the last days of the old Empire, was telling the class about the war. Teacher, Victor asked, his scales shifting to the blue of curiosity. Why do we celebrate the day we lost a war? The teacher's scales turned gray, the color of memory and respect. We don't celebrate, young one. We remember. Every species in the galaxy marks that date, but not as a celebration. Then what is it? The teacher pulled up a hologram of the monument that stood in the center of their capital. 3,800 names carved in earth marble. At the bottom, those words, "We chose peace, you chose this." It's a reminder, the teacher said. On that day, the humans showed us what mercy looked like, not by being gentle, but by showing us what they chose not to be. They showed us that they could have destroyed us all at any time in the previous 30 years. They chose not to. But why? Victor asked. If they were so strong, why pretend to be weak? They weren't pretending to be weak, the teacher corrected. They were practicing being civilized. There's a difference between being unable to commit violence and choosing not to commit violence. The humans are not weak. They are restraint incarnate. The teacher showed another image, this one of a human trade ship passing through their system, just that morning. It was painted white with the blue symbol of Earth on its hull. It looked peaceful, harmless even. That ship, the teacher said, carries food and medicine. Its crew smiles and trades fairly. They help when our ships break down. They teach our children Earth games. They share their music and their art. And beneath that white paint is a warship that could crack our moon in half. That seems dangerous, Victor said. No, the teacher replied. What's dangerous is forgetting what they choose to be instead of what they could be. The humans gave us a gift that day 300 years ago. They showed us that strength isn't about what you can do. It's about what you choose not to do. The class ended with the students standing before the monument reading the names. 3,000 from the colony ships, 800 from the Esperanza. Each name a reminder that humans had chosen peace until peace was no longer possible, and, at the very bottom, added by human engineers when they helped rebuild the city, a new line. They died believing in our better nature. We honor them by choosing to be better, until we cannot. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Human ships traveled in white, human diplomats spoke of peace, human traders dealt fairly, and everyone everywhere remembered the 17 hours when the Deathworlders stopped playing nice. They remembered, and they were grateful when the humans chose to play nice again. Because they all knew, deep in whatever they had that passed for souls,